going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube and rate the show 5 stars everywhere you get your podcast. We are getting very, very close to our 58 5-star reviews out there on Apple Podcast. And once we reach that, then we will give out a Darnell Wright jersey live on the show. How are you doing, my friends? I am excited to go through this. We got some big news that we have to break down for the Chicago Bears. Obviously, I'm talking about that coaching changes. We talked about it a couple episodes ago, where Courtney Cronin, kudos to her, was talking about that she felt that something was going to happen on Wednesday. Something was going to happen 24 to 48 hours, and it did. This morning, Wednesday morning, all of a sudden, Getsy's out. What's good, broski? And yeah, so Getsy is officially out, but also who is out as well, the Bears fired Luke Getsy, fired quarterbacks coach Andrew Janocko, running backs coach Omar Young, wide receivers coach Tyke Tolbert, and assistant tight ends coach Tim Zetz. So to me, I think that the big piece with this, right? Obviously Luke Getsy. I also look at Tyke Tolbert. That was someone that was very well respected when the Bears hired him. Also, quarterbacks coach Andrew Janocko. He was someone that I was very curious. Like, I know a lot of people were saying, well, maybe he would take over Getsy's job if Getsy was good, right? But now, obviously, Getsy's not here. He's not good at his job. But then Andrew Janocko, I was even mentioning too, is he someone that the Bears might want to get promoted because Janocko is kind of understands Justin Fields. So Janocko's firing made me kind of feel like, you know, we'll talk about Justin Fields a little bit later, but that was a little bit like, okay. And so Bears keep their tight ends coach and their offensive line coach, Chris Morgan. And something that was also interesting was they said, hey, you have whoever we hire next as the offensive coordinator, you have to have these other players with you. So, or the other coaches with you, Chris Morgan and also Jim Dre, the tight end coach. So interesting dilemma, interesting piece that we have. But right now, we basically needed a whole new offense and a defense. So like I have down below, those watching out on YouTube, let me know down below what you think. And also, broski, good point. 2 running backs coaches fired in the same season. Very, very interesting. And I mean, we had good play out of the running backs. And I will say that is the one thing I will miss about Getsy is he got this running game looking good. When, you know, we had Matt Nagy where he could never get the running game good. So we were at least able to run the football, but clearly we were not able to pass it. Clearly there was some really bad play calling decisions, and ultimately Getsy's fired. And I think that a big piece of this too, they talked about it, that they really asked all the players what they thought of this coaching staff, what they thought of just playing for the Chicago Bears. So it's pretty evident that the offensive play callers were really the biggest piece that really kind of made it so that he was eventually going to be out. So Getsy fired. How do we feel? I guess for me, taking this in, I think like I had a lot of the similar reactions to everyone, like most fans, right? Because it's like, okay, Getsy's fired. Cool. This is awesome. And then the next wave was, okay, well, is Eberflus going to be fired? And Eberflus isn't fired. So they're running it back. And then it's that feeling of, well, what is this? Is this a 1-year window that you're just kind of giving Matt Eberflus, like, we're going to see what ends up happening? Or is this a longer term move where they want to see, like, okay, this isn't just 1 year. We want to kind of rebuild this. We like Matt as the centerpiece. Now let's just solidify the defense, right? Just bring in a defensive coordinator and then go with offensive coordinator. Then, you know, rebuild that offense. And I did find it funny that when they were being interviewed, they really highlighted the words continuity. Like they're talking about continuity. And it was like, but you just blew away your entire offense. Like, I don't really think that's too much continuity, right? You're keeping the head coach at least. and a lot of the pieces on the defense. But I will say this too. I do trust Ryan Poles, and what they said was it was Ryan Poles' decision to keep Matt Eberflus, and it was Matt Eberflus's decision to get rid of Getsy. Now, I love that they said that, but after I literally typed it inside of my notes, I went, wait a second. If it was Matt's decision to fire Getsy, did Ryan know about this? My guess is he probably did when they had the discussion, but it's like that would have been a good thing to know beforehand. But obviously, I'm glad that they at least made it clear that it was Ryan Poles' decision, because I know us Bears fans, we don't want the McCaskies making any decision. So that was something that I did like that kind of came out of the interview. But let's review this interview, shall we? Because this interview had a lot of very interesting points out there. So some of the big key pieces of this interview, and you could tell it was pretty long. It was a 90-minute interview, and I tried capturing the biggest ones that I found out there. So when I was listening to it, number one, they did not talk with Jim Harbaugh, or that's what they said. Because they said that they didn't talk to him, that he's Michigan's coach, but at the same time, too, are you really going to sit next to Matt Eberflus and say who you interviewed before going, and we decided to go with Matt Eberflus, right? And then also they were saying how the end of the year really kind of gave and instilled that faith inside of Eberflus, just the way that he was able to handle kind of that adversity. But also, they also mentioned that they want someone to own the offense. And Matt even emphasized that you have to take control. He couldn't be everywhere. And it did kind of come off that Eberflus was frustrated with Getsy. And I kind of liked hearing that. It kind of, the way that he responded felt like he did not like what Getsy was doing, hence why he, let him go. But it seemed like Eberflus really wants someone to truly come in and build this offensive staff and own this offensive staff. And we'll go through this when we start talking about offensive coordinators and how important that actually is. But then next, first pick decision will be out in April, right? Ryan Poles doesn't want to give any details away. He's like, well, if someone gives me a good deal, then yeah, I'll totally go with that. So then next is the 5th-year option is still in the air with Justin. And what Ron said, bye-bye Bustin'. That's, I think, the big piece. And then, Broski's saying, I did enjoy SiriusXM radio destroying Fields today. His sack ratio is mostly on him. I do actually agree. His sack ratio is very, 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 very high up on that as well. And a big reason why that actually happened. But as we continue going on with more of these, the end of the year showed a lot in Flus. Never mind, I duplicated that one. Jalen Johnson, he did say will be back. I had an entire episode on that. If you haven't seen it or watched it or listened, go back and listen to it. Jalen Johnson will be back. He said he will. And then he said next month they will continue to talk a little bit more about what is going to be coming up next. But also something that, two things, right? Kevin Warren talked about Chicago being kind of a destination. And his big piece was talking about the stadium. And I don't really love a lot of this stadium talk because it's going to be 10 years. I'm going to be in my 40s when that happens. So to me, I'm not super hardcore about what happens with the stadiums, but Kevin Warren was raving about Chicago, which had a lot of people thinking maybe he wants to not be in Arlington Heights and instead be out inside it, in downtown Chicago some more. So we'll just see. But the last little piece, because I'm kind of pissed off about this one piece, the emphasis on Chicago being a destination. That was something that kind of frustrated me when I was hearing them talking about this, because I love that they love Chicago. I love that they love their situation. They were pushing that up, that they're saying Matt Eberflus said they were talking about our phone is blowing up for offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, and we're a destination. But when you need an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator, and you have a head coach that has struggled, I think something that we've seen this time and time again. Us Bears fans know this. What has happened every coaching staff that we've had, or from in recent memory? We draft a quarterback with a suspect head coach that we don't know, should they have been fired this year? Should they not have been fired this year? And then the next year, they get fired. Then the quarterback has nobody there because we all know that when a head coach leaves, everybody else leaves. So that's where when they're talking about Chicago being a destination that people want to, that the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators are lining up outside the doors, that's where I'll talk about it a little bit later. But that's something that just I didn't necessarily love because do you guys really think that? Or are you guys just saying that? Are you trying to hype it up like a bad salesman? What are you trying to do with that? So that's my big piece. But Bears junkie out here, I really don't want the deal with downtown Chicago. The traffic is awful. I agree with you right there. I do agree. As someone, I don't go downtown too often. I live in Wisconsin. I do like the idea of taking the train down and then just doing that. But yeah, if you're trying to drive in and out, yeah, that's not any fun. But I will say, I do like the idea of it being in Chicago just because it's a Chicago Bears. But for that's where I'm like, it's 10 years down the road. I'm very indifferent about stadiums. I could go either way with it as long as everything works out. But let's talk about the other big piece. Is Fields safe? And that's what I kind of want to know what you all think about this. Is Justin Fields actually safe? Did it help or hurt his chances of being a Bear with today? Because personally, my take, I think it did technically, it kind of helped him and kind of hurt him. I'm going to kind of straggle this line. If Getsy was back, I think that really helps Justin Fields because then they're going, we're running it back for one more year. And it does help that they kept Eberflus, but it did hurt that they got rid of Getsy. If it's specifically about Getsy being fired, I think it actually hurts Justin Fields because now you get an offensive coordinator that's coming in. He's probably going to want to run whatever he wants to do. And I think that it truly is like what I talked about last episode. I really do believe that Ryan Poles is evaluating every single option. He's going to be going through all the tape of every quarterback. And I think he's smart enough to know that don't just hitch your wagon to the quarterback just because you have the number one pick. If you are not sold on Caleb Williams as the guy, do not hitch your wagon to it. And I was listening to Carmen and Yurko, and John Yurkovich brought a very good point up because all these people are saying the Bears missed out on CJ Stroud. And his point, which I fully agree with, was that, wait a second, that no one was saying that first pick was for CJ Stroud. Everyone was saying it was the Bryce Young sweepstakes. And everyone this year is saying it's the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. That's where here, if you are not sold on Caleb Williams, do not waste the first pick. Be smart, be strategic about it, which I do trust Ryan Poles with. One of the biggest compliments that I have felt with his GMship is the idea of trading back in drafts. He seems to have a really good grasp on that, and kind of with the whole trading back aspect seems to be pretty darn good with that. Also, we have Ron. So to the question of should Fields be here? No. Very simple to the point. Broski said I could see it either way. No idea right now. I think Poles will look. Yeah, same thing. And that's where I think the big piece. Yeah. And yeah, Broski is saying too. Yeah, there was one reporter. I think it was Mark something. I forgot who it was. But every single interview question was, so CJ Stroud, what do you feel about not taking CJ Stroud? What do you feel about that? And he kept bringing up CJ Stroud over and over again. But I think overall, they are going to evaluate it. They are going to think about it. But let's talk about this next piece. Eberflus extension? What? So some of you might have heard of this. Some of you might have seen this going around. Some of you might have seen it as my first thumbnail that I had for this YouTube live event. There's a lot of talk about, did Eberflus get an extension? And why would they do that? Right? Let's talk about the why they would actually give Eberflus an extension. And because when you hear it, you go, that is one of the dumbest things that I've ever heard in my life. But then you go, wait a second, why would they actually do this? And that's to ensure a new offensive coordinator that there's some sort of job stability. So the idea, they don't have to announce it to everyone, right? There was a lot of inside sources that said that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace got extensions back in the day, but no one could really confirm. It was just kind of rumors floating around. But it is, if you really think about it, it can be a solid option in the sense of if you want to go after a top offensive coordinator, and if they truly believe in Matt Eberflus, which obviously they are running it back with him, if they do believe in him, then does it make sense to essentially reset the clock and give him an extension as if you just hired him this year? Let me know what you guys think down below, because this is such a weird concept, but in reality, it does kind of make sense. The only reason why I'm not like, this is a brilliant idea, is because I'm like, for Eberflus? Like, we could have had Mike Vrabel. Like, Mike Vrabel's a better defensive coach, a better all-around head coach. I think that's the hard part. But when we get into the offensive coordinators, we'll be talking about this. And that's why I wanted to bring this up, because if you had a job, and let's just put this in the real world, right? You have a job, you are part of a brand new department that had a terrible last year. Terrible. 2 years beforehand, it's part of this new experimental division, right? And it's been bad for 2 years. And then they go, you know what? We had a good Q3, right? Q1 sucked, Q2 sucked, Q4 sucked, but Q3 was really good. Would you really want to go there? And I think that's why the idea of having more, by showing that there's some stability, and they talk about the frame of stability. Would you give an extra year extension to Flus just to kind of settle the nerves of an offensive coordinator? To me, it's not my money. It's the Bears' money. It's their money. And if that means that I can get a better offensive coordinator by putting their mind at ease by giving Flus an extra year or two, and it's only going to cost me, $8 million, and I'm a multi-billion-dollar organization? What's that? Just and if they truly believe in him, then that's where it does make sense. It sounds so weird saying that, right? But that's, I think, part of the big piece in all of this. The big piece in the puzzle is that if you keep Flus, now you have to convince everyone else that he's going to be here for the long haul. So very interesting thing that I've heard buzzing around. So if you do see someone talk about an Eberflus extension outside of myself, or people kind of say that and it sounds absurd, now you know why they would do something like that. And it's really just to try and attract a top-end offensive coordinator candidate. So let's get into offensive coordinators and candidates, shall we? We have waited long enough. Let's get into this. So offensive coordinators, I kind of want to know from you, the people, what do we think about some of the offensive coordinators out there? Also, yeah, Ron, you are not blocked. I just saw it come in. I don't know if the comments weren't working real quick. But also, Caleb Williams will paint his nails, cry back home to his mommy. But yeah, I don't know. Comments might not be working right now, but we will see if YouTube is. I hope that they're not. I hope that they are working, because we got to know. I got to know what everyone's favorite offensive coordinators are out there, because offensive coordinators, I think that there's a couple options. I mean, there's a lot of options that are out there, and I was trying to whittle it down to just 5 that are on my top of the list. But before I get into that, right, the Bears were saying phones ringing off the hook. People want to talk to them. If you look at the staff that they kept, and if just looking at that and tying it together, Chris Morgan has connections to Darrell Bevell, who was the offensive coordinator in 2014 with him in Seattle. And really, that is a good option. He's a longtime offensive coordinator. The one thing that I don't necessarily love is that he's only had 2 top 10 offenses in the past 11 years. So he's had good offenses. And I think that Darrell Bevell is a solid option, especially with his experience at offensive coordinator. I don't have it down, but it was over 15 years of being an NFL offensive coordinator. So if you want someone good to come in that's very well experienced and knows Chris Morgan, that is one option. Another one that has worked with Chris Morgan is Mike LaFleur, he was the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, or with the Falcons. But my biggest question is, why would he leave? Because right now, Mike LaFleur is the offensive coordinator of the Rams, and before that, offensive coordinator for the Jets. So why would you move over? It goes back to that, what's the enticing piece of the Bears situation? Why is it more enticing than the Rams, where the Rams look really good? And if you stay at this cushy job where Sean McVay's doing all the decisions, do you become a head coach? Right. And that's where I don't necessarily, I like Mike LaFleur, but I don't necessarily think he would be moving over. But I do think if he wants to move over, I'm all for it. A young coach that knows the system, that has a very similar system, and him and Chris Morgan have the connection together. But the last person that I want to talk about before getting into my top 5 is Jim Dray, the tight ends coach for the Bears, has a connection to Cliff Kingsbury. So Cliff Kingsbury, that name rings some bells to some Bears fans out there. Cliff Kingsbury was the the head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. And when he was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, he helped Kyler Murray get two Pro Bowls. So he was pretty good, and now he's at USC as the senior offensive analyst quarterbacks coach. So Cliff Kingsbury is actually one of my top 5 offensive coordinator targets because he can control an offense. I just don't think he can control I just don't think that he can control a locker room. I don't think that he's a head coach at the NFL level, but I do think that from an offense, if you could get one of his players, that's something that I'm kind of curious about, right? I think that he could be a good person to bring in if you're going Caleb Williams. If you're not going Caleb Williams, I'm not that big on it. It's just more of if you have someone that already knows who he is and what he likes to do and was his quarterback's coach at USC, then why the heck not? So yeah, but also before I get into any more, I kind of want to take some of the comments as well. Ant Mass saying, I hope we keep Justin Fields. So all y'all crying, it's just magic. Justin Fields will be a lot better with an experienced offensive coordinator. I will say part of me wants to see him, though, with an experienced offensive coordinator, an experienced play caller like a Jim Caldwell that we haven't talked about as well. Jim Caldwell, right now a Panthers assistant. He's been around the league a whole bunch, well-respected coach, multiple-time head coach, most likely would not get another head coaching job, but he would be someone that would be interesting to kind of put around a Justin Fields. Jay Sanders, anybody associated with Mike Macdonald, that's a good piece because someone who is associated with Mike Macdonald, do I actually have him listed down? Of course I don't actually have him listed down. Oh, it's the quarterback's coach for him. It is Darrell Bevell, actually. Darrell Bevell is the quarterback's coach for the Miami Dolphins right now. So he is associated with Mike McDaniel. Could be a good piece there. And then Jay Sanders also saying Byron Leftwich. That's another good piece. The only thing that has me a little nervous about it, when Bruce Arians left Tampa Bay, you kind of saw that offense kind of drop a little bit. So that was something I was a little bit kind of turned off a little bit by. But Bears Bones saying, could we get Eric Bieniemy? He wasn't offered the head coach in Washington. Great segue, because one of my other top 5s is Eric Bieniemy, the Chiefs and Commanders offensive coordinator, former offensive coordinator. My biggest question is, what is the problem with Eric Bieniemy? Why is he not a head coach? He comes in, he has Sam Howell have the number 1 passing yards in the entire NFL. And not a lot of people were expecting too much out of the Washington offense, but the Washington offense did explode. I like the idea of Eric Bieniemy. My big question is, what is it with him, the person, that does not allow him to get these head coaching gigs? Because he went out and he proved it. He proved that he's a good offensive mind. So, yeah, if he's available and he's like, you know what? I'm going to do this over here. And he has the connection to Ryan Poles. But is Matt Eberflus going to be doing this hire? I think that Eric Bieniemy would be a fantastic home run of a pick, because everywhere he goes, this offense looks good. And maybe it's they don't trust him to make staff decisions. I don't know what it is, but I really like Eric Bieniemy. That's why he's one of my top 5 coaches out there. But also, next one that I have out there, I'm not in love with this one, but Greg Roman. Greg Roman, I think if the Bears were to add Greg Roman, that would be a big sign for Justin Fields, because Greg Roman, we know what he did with the Ravens, where he was the one that really unlocked Lamar Jackson and has been the person that people talk about with Lamar Jackson. But before that, he was the offensive coordinator for the 49ers with Jim Harbaugh. And they had Colin Kaepernick, a similar type of player to Justin Fields, a mobile quarterback, and they could do a little bit more read options. So Greg Roman is great if you want to keep Justin Fields. So that's why I just threw him out there as one of my top targets out there. But there's a lot of rumors out there that he is actually going to follow Jim Harbaugh wherever he ends up going. So that's where Greg Roman might not actually be someone that the Bears wind up getting. But another person that I absolutely love is, I actually really, really like Frank Reich, former Colts head coach, former Panthers head coach. And you saw after Frank Reich left, the Panthers offense really did drop off and did not look the same. And the reason why I also really like Frank Reich, because he knows Matt Eberflus. He was the head coach when Matt Eberflus was the defensive coordinator. And Matt Eberflus needs someone he can trust. Why not someone that is a former head coach, that has had good offenses, and that knows that the head coach for the Chicago Bears? I think it's a perfect match if he doesn't retire, because there's a lot of rumors out there that Frank Reich said, listen, I just got fired. I'm making $7 million for the next 3 years. I don't need to do this. So there's a lot of rumors that he's not going to be around, that he's just going to retire. And I think that is a big piece that we need to consider. And also, I just scrolled down and saw this. Corey Smith, thank you so much for the super chat. $10 super chat. Here is a 2-step solution. Hire Zach Robinson, passing game coordinator from the Rams, draft Michael Penix Jr. and Odunze, potentially a lethal pairing, once you add DJ Moore and Kmet. Ooh, that is that's interesting, because Zach Robinson, I've seen his name fluttered around there a handful of times, like you mentioned, passing game coordinator for the Rams. And with his name fluttering around, it seems like he has a good reputation around the NFL. Penix and Odunze, this is something that I really like the idea of the Bears potentially doing. Because when you look at the quarterbacks, and we'll have a separate episode where we break down the quarterbacks, I like this quarterback class. This quarterback class is deep. This quarterback class has a lot of people. And I think Penix has a lot of arm talent. My only thing is, sometimes he looks like Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite when he throws the football. And if you watch his tape and then look at that, you go, okay, yeah, now I see it. But the guy has a cannon. The guy can get the ball anywhere you want. He's got that long range accuracy. And Odunze, I like him as a wide receiver that you can get with that 9th pick. So yeah, if you trade back, maybe Penix drops out of the first round. Maybe Penix drops to the late first round. So then you don't have that high draft capital, but you have someone that you draft. And then I think a big key piece is, let's just say things go south. You're not necessarily tied to Michael Penix. So I really like that. And Zach Robinson is a good call, because, yeah, like I mentioned, I didn't have him on my list. I forgot to put him on there, but a lot of people really like him. So good point, Corey Smith. And thank you again for the super chat. Very, very appreciate that. Also, Broski saying Poles was around Bieniemy for so long and doesn't seem fond of him. See, that's the thing. Bieniemy, what does he say to people? Is he just coming in and just insulting people? I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, but I can call a mean offense, right? What is he saying that is pissing everybody off, that doesn't allow him to get hired? But I'll just go with my last one, then I'll read the rest of the comments real quick. Shane Waldron is a low-key stud at the offensive coordinator position. So he was the former offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. And keep in mind that Carroll, that actually just is going to leave the Seahawks or not be the head coach anymore, he's a defensive mind. Shane Waldron is the offensive coordinator and unlocked Geno Smith, a decently mobile quarterback that just could never really get things together. I look at that and go, what can you do with Justin Fields? What can you do with the next quarterback that we get? Doesn't have to be Fields. Could be like what we were talking about. It could be Michael Penix. It could be J.J. McCarthy. It could be Jaden Daniels. Could be Caleb Williams. Probably would be Caleb Williams if they do draft one, but I like those later rounds. I think that could be a really slam dunk hire for the Chicago Bears at the offensive coordinator position. But there's a lot more that we'll go through. Let's go through some comments first, and then I'll talk about some of the other people that we can keep on the list unless they pop up on this. Broski saying Justin Fields would be better if he learned pocket awareness, how to read a defense, stop fumbling. yeah, and started completing passes. And the fourth quarter, I do agree with that. I think he was statistically the worst quarterback in the fourth quarter in the NFL. And then Tommy David, there's no metric that can lead you to believe Fields is better than Caleb. Yeah. Then Jay Sanders saying McDaniel. Ron saying Caleb would paint his nails his team's colors. There's so much like the Caleb Williams hate. So I just posted that video yesterday for those that haven't seen it. I thought it was super interesting that the draft experts were talking about that they love Caleb Williams, that it's a no-brainer, right? That was my most disliked video of all time because I guarantee you it was because I had Caleb Williams in a Bears jersey. Like that's it, right? Like if you ever want to just get a bunch of dislikes, just have Caleb Williams on the front page of it. But yeah, Corey Smith saying Bieniemy is not professional. That could be the answer to all of it. But yeah, let me see that lots and lots of stuff. We have a lot of people liking Bieniemy out there. Jay Sanders saying heard Kansas City tried to rehire Bieniemy, but Commanders blocked him. Let's see. Yeah, like Nagy, Bieniemy didn't call plays in Kansas City. Then both get their chances. And Nagy with the Bears. Yep. And sold you on Frank. There we go. Right, Frank Reich. Also, too, the dude is. He wants to retire, right? And if he wants to retire, he doesn't care if he gets fired in a year. He's going to still get his 3-year contract paid out. He's going to have more money to go on cruises with his wife, you know? So that's something that I'm curious about. So Corey, good dynamic duo option. I really like Johnny Newton out of Illinois. Yeah, that defensive lineman, that 3 technique is a freaking stud, a freaking beast. And my internet was glitchy right there. So I'm sorry if I was choppy going in and out. But yeah, also, Broski, thank you. Smash that like as well. But let's carry on. Actually, let me just talk about a couple more, and then we'll move on to defensive coordinators. So get those defensive coordinators ready. Want to just bring up some of the other people that we have not talked about at the offensive side. Jim Caldwell, mentioned him very briefly. Pep Hamilton is someone to look out for, someone that the Bears did interview as an offensive coordinator when they were interviewing Getsy. Right now, he's the Houston or the DC Defenders head coach, and he was the Houston Texans offensive coordinator, not this year, but the year before that. Ken Dorsey is also someone to look out for. The Bills OC was pretty good. The only thing I don't think the Bears would love is he's a little hot-headed. Seems like he knows what he's doing, but yeah, little bit hot-headed, you could say. Clint Kubiak is another person to look out for from the Kubiak system, which would be very similar to what the Bears were already running. Only thing is he was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings. Didn't do too much. 11th best passing offense, 16th best running offense. And 2 others. Brian Greasy, the former Bears quarterback. He's spent 2 years so far as the 49ers quarterbacks coach. A lot of people like him. A lot of people rave about his intelligence. So he could be someone to look out for. And the last but not least, pains me to say this, Arthur Smith, the former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, who never likes to use his weapons. he was still ran the 12th best offense in Tennessee, and then it was the second best offense in Tennessee before he got the head coaching gig. Essentially did not want to use any of his superstars, but the reason why I think they might be looking for a former head coach is because they want them to have that mentality that they don't have to go back to daddy, the head coach, and say, can you help me build this? Former head coaches can be a little bit more self-sufficient. So that's why I think they might be trying to look a little bit more that way. But let's go over to some defensive coordinators, shall we? Let's get into this. Defensive coordinators, let me know who your top defensive coordinators are, because this is a short list for me. I actually had to add people to it. It's Phil Snow. We saw what Phil Snow was able to do, and also too, what defensive coordinator wants to go into this job and not pick his staff? Because this is Matt Eberflus's staff, and from what we've heard, and I had this somewhere written down in my notes, but what it really felt like is Flus has talked about this. It wasn't today. I think it was a different day. He was saying that he wanted to be the CEO of the team, right? We all knew that. He wanted to be the CEO, but now he realized that he likes calling plays, and he's good at calling plays. And we joke about this. He's a darn good defensive coordinator. Head coach, we'll see next year, I guess. But I think that he wants to be the play caller. All signs point to him wanting to be the play caller. So why not run it back with someone in the building? So my top people for the defensive coordinator position, really, I just had 4, and 2 of them were just, I was like, I'll just add 4, right? And you can even tell out there on YouTube what I thought about this, because I didn't even change the Colts logo to the Bears logo. So Phil Snow is my number 1, the Bears' current senior defensive analyst. We've talked about him before. When Phil Snow took over, this entire Bears defense looked better. This entire Bears defense got life into it. There is that Montez Sweat effect, but there is also the Phil Snow effect, because he joined around week 5, and after that, the defense took over. So why not bring him in, promote him to a defensive coordinator gig, and say, don't worry, Phil, you do the same thing that you were before, right? Just keep on doing your job, right? And let's say that he doesn't want to do that. He wants to stay as a senior defensive analyst. John Hoke, the Bears' current cornerbacks coach and passing game coordinator. We've seen some tremendous development out of our cornerbacks, but also I've seen people talk about John Hoke. People love John Hoke and rave about him. He's also been a defensive coordinator at Kent State back in 1989. In Florida, he was a defensive coordinator 1999 to 2001, and in Maryland, 2019 to 2020. So he's had experience as being a defensive coordinator if they want to just promote within. But to me, they should. I can't see them adding anybody else. So my last 2 that I just added, because I was like, this would be cool. Jim Leonard. He currently is the senior football analyst at Illinois. He was the former defensive coordinator at Wisconsin and was a freak of nature. That defense was always good, always cooking every single week. But now he's over at Illinois. Maybe he's someone that you look at bringing in. But I just think that he would yet again want to do his own thing. And I think that's where the defensive coordinator spot probably isn't that sexy. The other piece is Ron Rivera. Why not? Why not run it back with him? Former Chicago Bears defensive coordinator. And obviously he was the former head coach of the Commanders and the Panthers. Probably not going to get a head coaching gig ever again. So why not come back home to Chicago and do something like that, right? Ultimately, Phil Snow, John Hoke, that's who I ultimately think that the Bears are going to go with. I don't believe these bottom 2 at all. If they do, awesome. Then those are 2 good people to have in the building that you just added. So can't complain there at all. But another person to talk about too is Dave Borgonzi. I just didn't add him to my list. He's their current linebackers coach. And it sounds like Matt Eberflus has a lot of respect for the guy, and he could be someone that gets promoted. I ultimately think because you like the way that this defense was, and because Matt Eberflus, once the defense ran his way, I think he's just going to promote from within and not try and bring anything else in unless he does know someone from his coaching past that he thinks could kind of do a little bit better. But I like the idea of really just kind of promoting from within. And Corey, again, thank you so much. $10 super chat. Thank you so much. What you said, okay, I have an opinion about the DC. I say make a splash. Drum roll. Rex Ryan, and make him one of the highest paid coordinators. If Flus fails, hire him for the head coaching job. That is, I was not expecting Rex Ryan. That is very interesting because Rex has been a good coach. He has been a good coach. My biggest fear with that is just how he would take, how it kind of affects the defense. I do think that they're just going to run it back, but Rex Ryan, I mean, it would be interesting. And hey, like you said, the head coaching job, he's had a lot of success, and, but the big thing, you just bring some people in with some nice feet. You get him in there, he'll probably take a couple $1 million off, but that is an interesting hire. It would be cool to get another Ryan back in, like for all 1985 types of pieces too. But yeah, but thank you again so much for the super chat. Broski saying Ron Rivera's old and washed up. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling too. Like, what can he do as a DC? I just wanted to add that. But Bears Bones, Jim Leonard would fit the hits principle. He would, right? But I think that's ultimately where they might just stick within. Another person too that I thought of was Brandon Staley, the former defensive coordinator he was on the Bears defensive staff, went over to the Rams, was awesome, gets hired by the Chargers. Only thing, he's more 3-4, different type of a system, more of that Vic Fangio system. So I just don't think that he would come over because of just this clashing of schemes. But let's get this show wrapped up. Let's talk about what is next now for the Chicago Bears. So what's next? Now we play the waiting game. Like I mentioned before, Jalen Johnson, we now have to wait for him to get a contract, whether it's a true contract extension. He was saying a couple things on Twitter or X now that he does feel like he's going to get it. Like he kind of alluded that he feels good about where things are at with his contract. So we'll just have to wait and see with that. But next, who are they going to be bringing in for interviews? Are they going to get things started? Are they going to be waiting a little bit? We will have you covered out here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I love these live shows that we're able to just kind of talk, have some fun. And yet again, Corey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, my friend. But with that, thank you all so much. Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.